Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to the Living Your Greatness podcast. So the guest that we have on today is Steve Penny. So for those of you that don't know who Steve is the founder and publisher of the Silver Chartlist website. Steve is a full-time trader specializing in silver, gold, and uranium. Steve uses a chart analyst approach to support the macro and the micro fundamentals to support his decisions when investing in the precious metals and mining sector. Steve is also our first American guest. So Steve, welcome to the show. Good to have you here today.
Ben, thank you so much for inviting me on. Really appreciate it.
So Steve, if we could just start with kind of the first question here, which is, tell us about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in the United States? What led you to the precious metals and mining sector? And what motivates you most in this business?
Oh, what a great question. And I'll try and give a short answer. But so I grew up, my parents are hardworking blue collar people. They're self-employed house painters. And, we never had much money and they didn't have a financial education, but they worked hard. They taught me values and principles, but they just didn't know. So we never got ahead. And so I didn't want that for myself and for my kids. So I've always had a curiosity to learn, economics and how the financial system actually works. And it was back in the great financial crisis, 2008. I picked up this book by G. Edward Griffin. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a big, thick book, but my gosh, what an eye-opener. And you learn things that just aren't taught in schools, how debt-based fiat currency is literally created out of nowhere, and then it's owed back to these banking cartels with interest. Things that just aren't taught in school. So that really was an eye-opener to me. And then once you go down that path, that leads you to, okay, well, what do I do about this? How do I prosper in this environment? And that leads you towards learning about silver and gold and hard assets and, how when they have their cycles, they can really be, create tremendous wealth opportunities. So that's a short answer, I guess, for my background. And you also asked, what drives me? A lot of people in the beginning, you'd ask me why you're doing all this. And the easy answer might be, hey, I just want to make a bunch of money. But really, there's a deeper reason for that. And I want the time freedom to pursue life's higher callings, things of eternal significance, things that really matter in life. I want time freedom to spend more time with my family, to help homeschool my children. And everyone else has a why too. So I like to help people break free financially and achieve that time freedom. That's the goal. That's what drives me.
Yeah, those are absolutely good answers. And so Steve, gold and silver are the most popular precious metals. However, there are also many other types of precious metals, right? Such as platinum and palladium. In your newsletter, you teach people how to invest in silver, gold, and uranium. What makes you most bullish on these three commodities?
So I think of silver and gold as monetary metals, and not to be doom and gloom or anything like that, but I think a lot of United States, a lot of developed countries are headed towards a currency crisis. The real crux of the matter is that government central planners have two choices. They can either default honestly or inflate away their debts, because these debts that they have and unfunded contingent liabilities are just mathematically impossible to repay in today's dollars. It's just simple math. So people are going to look to, as this happens, as they debase the currency, to real money. Silver and gold, they've got a 6,000-year track record of being the prime beneficiaries of this exact kind of environment. So that's the macro bullish thesis for silver and gold. Now, uranium is a little bit of a different story. I like it because it's uncorrelated to a lot of commodities. It's a pure supply-demand story. Nuclear is a growth industry, and a lot of nuclear reactors are coming online around the world. And simply, the price has to rise. $30 uranium is not nearly high enough to incentivize that new production that's needed to meet all of these nuclear reactors that are coming online around the world. So that's the simple answer for why I like uranium and silver and gold.
Thanks, Steve. And a large portion of your portfolio is allocated towards physical silver and silver stocks. I assume this is one of the many reasons you go by the Silver Chartlist. So that our listeners can get a better understanding of this, why are you heavily interested in silver? What are the compelling investment fundamentals?
Yeah, absolutely. So silver is a very small market. I think of gold to kind of preserve purchasing power, but I think silver will actually increase your purchasing power. I think silver is probably the most undervalued commodity on the planet. It's trading half of where it was 40 years ago in 1980, and I think that's the only commodity on the planet that you can say that of. So it's a very small market, and when big money starts to pile in, there's precedent for really outsized returns. Now, these metals are very cyclical, so this isn't the kind of investment that you just sit, hold, set it, and forget it for the next decade or two. But for short periods of time in the economic cycle, silver can go vertical and make really outsized gains in a fairly short period of time. And I think we're just beginning to enter one of those periods right now.
Today has been an exciting day for actually both silver and gold, right? Gold has broken 1800 and silver has passed $27, making new monthly highs. So Steve, do you believe this is a new bull uptrend? How are charts looking right now?
I do. Today, we're talking on a really nice day here for the metals. They're both up nicely. And I kind of think of it as a stair step approach. So you take out one resistance level, and then often you run a little bit and you come back and back test it. And then you try and take out the next resistance level. It's like climbing a ladder. So today we broke through some really key resistance levels in both gold and silver. $1,800 has been key resistance on gold. And today we busted through that. And it happened on higher than normal volume, which is also encouraging. That shows big money, institutional investors, the general public starting to enter this market. So volume adds confirmation. The next target on gold is $1,850. And really the big resistance to watch is $2,089. That was the high of last August of 2020. So I think once we get above that high, which might take a few months, that's really when we could be off to the races in gold. Silver, similar story. Silver actually looks stronger on the charts than gold. It's above its key moving averages. Those are lines that institutions watch. And today we made a higher high. That's technically significant because it shows an uptrend. However, the big resistance to watch in silver is $30. To be really specific, $30.35. That level has failed two attempts in the last 12 months. But once we get above 30, I think the next intermediate term target is somewhere around $50 in the months ahead. But let's get above 30 first.
Knowing that 30 is like the target, what are your long-term price targets for silver? Any comments regarding expected timeline too for this?
Yeah, giving a price target and a time is always a dangerous game. But so I reserve the right to be wrong here. But here's kind of a roadmap I have, and I use this as kind of like a general guidance, not necessarily prediction for exactly how it's going to unfold. So 3 levels. First would be $30. Let's get above there. I think once we get above 30, we're likely to get back to the previous all-time high of $50 within a few months, call it 6 to 12 months. This stuff doesn't unfold, in very short time periods. A lot of newer investors, want things to happen immediately. So $30 would be the first target to get above, then 50. And then over the long term, if you just take an average of the previous 2 bull markets from the 1970s and then 1999 to 2011, as far-fetched as this might sound, that gives you a price target somewhere north of $300 silver. And, that's over a handful of years. So I think somewhere around 2026, that's a reasonable target. And that's just an average of the previous bull markets.
What fundamentals and technicals do you follow specifically to understand the trend of the silver price?
Yeah, so my specialty is like big picture macro fundamentals, and then I go to the charts and the technicals for precision buy points and exit points. I like to say fundamentals tell me what to buy, and technicals tell me when to buy or sell. So as far as the fundamental drivers for silver, a lot of people talk about growing industrial demand, and that is a bullish factor for silver. It's a tailwind. Silver is the best conductor of electricity, and its uses are only growing, especially with this growing trend of electrification, EVs, electric vehicles. So there's growing demand for silver, but really it's the investment demand that's going to drive the price to these really high levels that a lot of us investors are looking for, because you can map out and kind of predict and forecast industrial demand. But if just a small percentage of the global population says, hey, I want a little bit of silver, there's just not enough of it. Only roughly 800 million ounces are mined every year. So call it a billion ounces at $30 silver. That's $30 billion. That's nothing for a global market. So it's tiny. So when investors start to come in, that's when you can really see the price start to move.
And do you think, Steve, we are on the cusp of a currency crisis, and why? If so, what insurance policy should we have to protect us against a devalued dollar?
I do. I think we're headed for a currency crisis, and I don't see how it can be avoided. There's really no solution. Someone I follow says, problems have solutions, predicaments have managed outcomes. So I think we're in a predicament here where there's really no solution. There's just different managed outcomes. And the crux of the matter, like I said earlier, is that central bankers and central planners have no choice. They can either inflate the currency away, or they can default honestly. And history suggests there's no way they're going to default honestly. They're not going to tell pensioners, retirees, Medicare recipients, welfare recipients, hey, sorry, there's no money for you. Instead, they're going to print the money. So people will get the money that they're entitled. They're just not going to buy as much stuff as it used to. So the way to protect yourself against that is with hard assets. And I think we're entering a period here where for the last 40 years, stocks have done, they've been in a massive bull market for 40 years since 1980. Commodities have just been forgotten about. And commodities have never been so undervalued relative to stocks, really ever. And if you drill down, okay, well, which commodities present the most compelling fundamentals right now? I would say it's silver, uranium, and gold.
And so, Steve, this actually brings me to my next question. For the benefit of millennials like me, what allocation advice would you give us for investing in precious metals? As for silver, how would you recommend we structure our portfolio? For example, allocating our money across the physical metal and the silver miners.
So of course, it's an individual decision. I think just having at least 10% in physical metal is prudent, just as an insurance policy. Now, how much silver and gold, that's an individual decision as well. Silver is more volatile, but it has much more upside. And I think of the physical metal as defense, and I think of the mining stocks as offense. They're more risky. There's a lot more risk with mining stocks, but the upside potential is huge. So as far as how much to put in, that's an individual decision. I think of precious metals and commodities as like, if your whole financial plan looks like a pie, this can be a slice of the pie, and how big you want that slice to be is up to each individual.
Gotcha. So it kind of depends on everyone's investment risk ladder, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like for example, for me personally, look, if I were 70 years old and I'm in retirement, I'm thinking more about wealth preservation than capital appreciation, probably. So I just want to preserve my purchasing power. Well, in that case, I would probably want a lot more physical gold and less junior, silver mining stocks. But I'm relatively young. We're pretty young. So in general, young people can afford to be more aggressive. So if you're more aggressive, the junior silver mining stocks are the place to be. I mean, the upside potential there is just off the charts. It's almost unprecedented.
So Steve, in your newsletter, you make recommendations with respect to silver miners. Can you share with us your philosophy at investing between producers, mid-tiers, and junior miners in the silver space?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Whenever people start to build a mining stock portfolio, the first things they start to look at is, okay, what are the best stocks? And obviously, the stock selection is important, but really, I would argue that how you structure your portfolio is more important than individual stocks. So I think of, top tiers, mid tiers, and the speculations. And so the first question I ask myself is, how do I want that allocated to be? Or how do I want that allocation? So I like about, 30, 40, 50% in the top tiers, another 30, 40% in the mid tiers, and then 20% in the speculative section. For me, that fits my risk tolerance and objectives. But I think the sweet spot is in those mid tiers, the junior producers. They've got cash flow. They've got plenty of upside leverage to a rising silver price. And the risk is mitigated because they've got cash flow and they're not going to be diluting shareholders. They've got a proven mine. So I think that's probably the sweet spot.
All right, great. In your newsletter, I noticed it can speak to a lot of people, both the trader and the long-term investor. If someone was to follow your newsletter, do you think it suits more the trader or the investor? Also, can you clarify the difference between these two investing approaches?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So often trading and investing get conflated. They're two very different games with different rules, different objectives. So I like to say it's very hard to outperform a simple buy and hold strategy in a bull market. So I like to cater and speak more to newer investors who just have a longer term time horizon. So I do personally trade on a shorter term time frame, roughly 10% of my portfolio. And I do try and teach that to members as well. But that's not for everyone. That takes a little bit of time and some education to learn, but it's a nice skill. It can generate cash flow. And I think of investing as, a longer term time horizon. I'm willing to just ride out volatility in both directions. Where with trading, goal number one with trading is to not lose money. So it's all about risk mitigation over the short term. And it's less about predicting and more about managing risk in a well established time frame. So with trading, like I always use a stop loss, because rule number one is, preservation of capital. You don't want to lose money. So trading, investing, two different things.
All right, great, Steve. Steve, Jake Ducey has said that your free newsletter is better than most paid newsletters out there. Why do you think this is?
Yeah, he's very kind when he says that. But from the beginning, I did try and make this a little bit different. I've been following this sector for 15 years now, and I'm pretty new on the scene as far as being, out here in public doing interviews and having a newsletter. And I thought the newsletter industry has been ripe for disruption. I thought we could do things differently, and we try and do that by giving a ton of stuff away for free. So we have a weekly report that goes out for free, and I try and make it, as good as other paid content. And then the premium service, we keep it really cheap. It's like $9 a month. So, I'd rather serve more people and at a lower price point. So that's kind of the philosophy.
All right. And this kind of leads me to my next question, Steve. What is your motivation for helping people who have an interest in the precious metals and the mining sector? It seems like there is a greater purpose behind it.
Absolutely. We've all got a purpose, right? And so many people are just not educated on how the financial system works. And so many people are bogged down with jobs that they don't like, and they don't have time to pursue the things that they're called to do in life. So, this isn't about making money or out and buying nice stuff. I want people to have that time freedom. And, the fulfillment comes in helping other people. And, the feedback we get from members is just, it warms my heart, and it drives me. It gives me the motivation to, just try and be transparent and help people, as opposed to just, there's a greater purpose than just making money.
All right, Steve, what advice would you give millennials about getting more familiar with the mining sector? What should they be reading or listening to out there? And who are some of the people that we all should be following?
Let's see, there's some really good books on like macro fundamentals, and some people I follow. I like Peter Schiff. I like Jim Rickards. These are two that are really good. We just interviewed Willem Middelkoop. I like him a lot. These are guys who are great macro fundamentals. A book called Bankruptcy of Our Nation by Jerry Robinson is a really good book. Those are great places to start to get a grasp of the macro fundamentals. As far as like mining stocks, I've not to shameless plug, but our free newsletter is really good. But there's other great newsletters out there as well. But getting some guidance from someone you trust. I like Jeff Clark. He's on our team. Jeff Clark is one of the guys from KC Research. He's really good. I like Lobo Tigre. Rick Rule is a great one to follow.
Thanks, Steve. And which investment, gold, silver, or uranium, do you think will perform best in 2021?
Well, uranium's already had such a nice run, which I really can't say. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was silver or uranium. Either one is primed. Silver hasn't had its run yet. It's been they call it a base. It's just been kind of going sideways in a basing pattern for almost a year now, since last August. So what's that, 8 or 9 months? So silver is primed for a big move. Uranium's had a nice move already, but we're still early innings in uranium, and uranium's actually a smaller market than silver. So I think it would be a coin toss.
What are your top stock picks for 2021?
In the silver space, so I'll throw out a caveat that I think a basket approach is best, because mining is inherently risky, and it can be dangerous to have a favorite stock, and then you can get kind of married to it. When I look at all of them, they're all bad. The good ones are the ones that are making us money and going up. But I think the one that maybe that's the most compelling risk reward fundamentals right now over the next 12 to 18 months would be like Silvercrest. I like that one a lot. But if you're new, there's really nothing wrong with just going with an ETF like SILJ. You get access to a nice basket of mining stocks with one ticker.
And, we've touched a little bit on uranium, but we cannot end this podcast without touching more on the uranium space. Are we at the cusp of the next uranium bull market? What makes you think so? When would you suggest we step into this market? And do you have any recommendations on how to build a portfolio to prepare take advantage of this uranium bull market?
What a great question. So yes, I do believe we're right in the cusp here in the early innings of a major bull market. Uranium is very cyclical, and when uranium has a bull market, I mean the type of returns are really wild. Some people like Rick Rule, made I don't know how much. I think it was billions in the last uranium bull market. And what we see right now in the charts is not only breakouts, but we see the biggest buying volume across the sector ever, like historic all-time records. And that shows big money sees what's coming here, and they're taking their positions now. So that adds confirmation that we're in the early stages here. Now, like as far as how to gain exposure, I like to scale in over time. I don't like to just go in with one big purchase, because this sector is incredibly volatile. And you can make a case that maybe in the short term, the stocks have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves, but it's such a small market that when big money comes in, it could just keep going higher. You just don't know. So I would think scaling in over time. I tell our members, hey, if you have no exposure, now would be a good time to maybe take partial positions and then scale in over time on weakness.
And Steve, do you have any comments that you want to add to today's interview?
Nothing comes to mind that jumps out at me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and visit with you. Hopefully your listeners found it helpful, and I'd be happy to come on and visit more often if you'd have me. So thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it.
What is the best place for our listeners to find you?
Sure. Just a simple web address, silverchartist.com. That's where you can get that free letter. And then you'll have the opportunity, if you choose, to upgrade to that premium membership for $9, but really no pressure on that. We don't spam you or hit you with any kind of high pressure sales tactics. I think everyone should go get that free letter to start, silverchartist.com. Thank you.
Awesome, Steve. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks again for being here.
You bet. Thanks so much, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be considered personal, legal, or investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or any other product. It is based on opinions, current events, press releases, and interviews, but is not infallible. It may contain errors, and Living Your Greatness offers no inferred or explicit warranty as to the accuracy of the information presented. If personal advice is needed, consult a qualified legal, tax, or investment professional. Do not base any investment decision on the information contained on Living Your Greatness or our videos.